What is the creepiest true story someone has ever told you? Story 1. My grandmother had a recurring nightmare her entire life. In the dream, she would walk down a long, dark hallway, turn to the left, open a door, and see something terrible. She would always wake up before seeing what it was. When she was in her 40s, she went on vacation with her husband, my dad, and my aunt. They booked the hotel at the last minute, so they ended up with 2 rooms containing twin beds on opposite sides of the floor. Around 3 a.m., my dad woke up and could immediately sense that something was wrong. He called out in the darkness, "Dad?" No response. He turned on the bedside light. "Dad?" he said again, louder this time. Still nothing. Concerned, he got out of bed and tried to shake his father awake. He wouldn't wake up. My dad ran down the hotel hallway to my grandmother's room and started banging on the door. She opened it, clearly worried, and my dad shouted, "Something's wrong with Dad!" He led her down the hallway, a long hallway, to the last door on the left. My grandmother reached the door, turned left, and saw her husband dead in bed. A heart attack. She never had the dream again. Story 2. When I was around 7, my grandmother took care of a baby whose mother struggled with alcoholism and drug use. This woman would bring her child, let's call him John, to my grandmother's house and leave him there for months at a time. Naturally, our family became very attached to him and saw him as one of our own. One night, his mother came to pick him up. Her intoxicated boyfriend was driving, and they ended up crashing the car. John fell into a coma and remained unconscious for about 3 or 4 days. One night, my older brother woke up the entire house, screaming and crying, saying that John had died. Once my parents calmed him down, he explained that John had come into his room crying, saying he had to leave but was scared and wanted my brother to come with him. While my parents were trying to reassure him that it was just a bad dream, the phone rang. It was my uncle calling from the hospital to tell us that John had passed away. This happened over 30 years ago, but I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Story 3. When I was 3 years old, both of my parents had vivid dreams about something terrible happening to me. In my mom's dream, her mother, who had already passed away, came to her and said she just wanted to hold me. I never met my grandmother. She was killed by a drunk driver before I was born. In the dream, she told my mother not to be mad, that she just wanted to meet me. In my dad's dream, he felt an overwhelming sense of loss, like he had lost something precious, and it had completely shattered his life. He was helpless. They both woke up deeply unsettled but went on with their day. My dad took the truck, a Ford F-250, to the grocery store, brought the groceries home, and parked. My older sister, who was 5 at the time, was strapped into the front seat and couldn't get out. She started screaming and crying. While my dad carried the groceries inside, I went outside to the truck and tried to climb in. I fell beneath it and started crying too. While throwing a tantrum, my sister accidentally kicked the truck into neutral. It rolled over me, crushing my head and stopping on my chest. My dad ran outside, saw me, and panicked. He couldn't find the keys. They were in one of the grocery bags. He screamed for help, and neighbors came to assistant. The truck was too heavy to lift, so they had to push it forward, rolling it over the rest of my body. I had to be airlifted to the hospital. On the way there, my heart stopped for about a minute. Miraculously, the only physical damage was scarring, a broken collarbone, and some dental issues. I needed caps on all my baby teeth and wore braces for 6 years. That was the first dream like that my parents had. Later, when my little sister and brother were born, my mom had similar dreams. My sister's lungs collapsed, and my brother was born very ill. Years later, my mom had another dream where her mother said she had held all of us now, and everything would be okay. Nothing serious has happened since. Story 4. I live near a camp that I used to attend as a child. When I was 7, there was a counselor there from Russia. The camp had a large staff exchange program, so it wasn't unusual to meet people from other countries. But this guy was different. Very strange. The other counselors said he was incredibly fast. During staff-only campfires, he would allegedly catch, skin, and eat live rabbits. He had this bizarre move, a kind of sleeper hold. It was essentially a strangling technique that would knock someone out for a few seconds. They would come to shortly after, seemingly fine. I saw him do it to another counselor once. The guy was out for about 10 seconds. After that, he was forbidden from ever doing it again. But the kids got curious and began asking him to do it. He started doing it in secret. Over time, he increased the intensity of the hold, and kids would stay unconscious longer. One day, a camper went missing. He wasn't in his bunk even though he had gone to bed with his cabin. The entire camp was gathered on the soccer field while staff searched the grounds. Eventually, they had to start searching the water. They found the boy under the sailing dock, completely unconscious, but alive. He had marks around his neck. Everyone knew what had happened. The Russian man was arrested and deported. Later, we learned something chilling. There was no record of him in the exchange program. No one knew who he really was. Story 5. Back in 5th grade, I found a Pokemon-themed chat room on Yahoo. There were about 15 regular users, most between the ages of 12 and 16, and we would role-play anime characters and storylines. Over time, I became close with some of them. We chatted on AIM and even by phone. Some of those friendships lasted 4 or 5 years. One guy stood out. He was eccentric, loved monster models and stories. Godzilla, Spawn, that kind of thing. He believed in mythical creatures like chupacabras, which I found silly but harmless. He lived in a rural Midwestern area that, to my West Coast mind, seemed very remote. After hundreds of hours of conversation, he shared something disturbing. He said he sometimes blacked out and would wake up to find himself hurting or torturing animals or even kids. He had cousins and neighborhood children nearby and confessed to having killed animals before. Hearing this made me feel sick. I love animals, and this chilled me to the bone. He said I was one of the only people he'd ever told. Then things got worse. Someone, either a family member or a family friend, believed he was possessed and decided to perform an exorcism. It happened at night, in a dark room lit by candles. He was tied to the bed in case the demon reacted violently. His voice trembled as he described the scene. The creepiest part was the end. He claimed that when the demon left his body, they heard something fall under the bed. Something that then scrambled across the floor and out of the room, leaving claw marks in the wood. He swore it cured him. He said he no longer hurt anyone or anything. I, like anyone else with sense, cut contact immediately. Story 6. My 4-year-old daughter was supposedly asleep when I heard noises coming from her upstairs bedroom. I tried to listen, but couldn't make out what was being said. As I approached the room, she stopped talking. Thinking I had startled her, I went inside. At the time, she was sharing the room with her 3-year-old sister. I walked in and saw the 4-year-old sitting up in bed. I smiled and asked, "Is everything okay?" She said it was, but her sister complained that they were keeping her up. I asked who she meant. My 4-year-old apologized and said she was talking. When I asked who she was talking to, my 3-year-old sat up and said, "The girl in the window. She said you were coming." Trying to stay calm, I asked who the girl was. They both said a girl comes at night, stands in front of the window and talks to them. Not knowing what to say, I tucked them in and waited outside their door. The next day, I asked again about the girl. They said she had come back but was angry. I waited a few more days and asked again. My 4-year-old said the girl in the window was still mad. I forgot about it for about a week until my wife suddenly asked, "Who are the girls talking to upstairs?" Startled, I ran upstairs and found both girls sitting under the window, looking up. They turned to me and asked if I wanted to meet the girl. Then, disappointed, they said she had left. It's been about 5 years since then, and they haven't mentioned the girl in the window again. Story 7. When I was about 11, some friends and I had a slumber party. In the middle of the night, we snuck out of the house and went to a park about half a block away. We had been there for at least an hour when I thought I saw a large, shadowy figure about 100 feet away, lurking in the trees. We all turned and stared in that direction for about 5 minutes, trying to make out what it was. Just as we were starting to convince ourselves we were imagining things, the figure suddenly started running at us at full speed. We jumped up and ran back to the house as fast as we could, locking the door behind us. We heard someone moving around outside and then tapping on the windows. We couldn't wake anyone up because we'd have to admit we had snuck out. We spent the rest of the night huddled together in the middle of the living room, terrified. Thankfully, nothing happened. Story 8. Up until I was about 6 or 7, I kept having strange dreams. It felt like watching a TV show. following a woman's life through a series of events. I didn't know who she was. Most of the dreams were random, like her coming home from work and finding her oldest daughter had locked her sister outside. Naked, I dreamed of this woman hurting her children. I saw her and her boyfriend using drugs, injecting something I later realized was hero. I even saw her die in a hospital bed from AIDS. None of it made sense to me until I dreamed of her funeral. The last dream I ever had was the worst. Her boyfriend assaulted the oldest daughter. Through the entire horrifying scene, I could hear the woman's voice saying, "Tell her I'm sorry. Please, Vanessa, tell her I'm sorry. I should have listened." I woke up in a panic, not just because of what I saw, but because the woman had called me by name. I ran to my mom, talking so fast I could barely get the words out. As I described the dreams, she just stood there, jaw dropped. When I got to the apology, she began to sob uncontrollably. My mother had never told me anything about her childhood or her mother. I had never even seen a photo of my grandmother. Story 9. My mom, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and several of their neighbors all swear they saw a UFO hover over my grandparents' house in the late 1960s. They said it floated silently above the backyard, spinning slowly with a faint whizzing sound, and glowing in all sorts of colors arranged in a ring. My mom and grandma said they remembered the TV and radio in the living room suddenly turning on full blast, broadcasting voices in other languages from foreign stations. Appliances in the kitchen began to rattle. My uncle said the UFO was right outside his bedroom window on the top floor. He was too terrified to move. He just stood there, staring. Years later, I believe I saw a UFO myself, with my mom. About 10 years ago, we were in the backyard behind our house, which opens up to about a mile of farmland. There was a bright white light bouncing in the middle of the field. Then it shot straight up into the sky and disappeared. Story 10. 10 years ago, about 2 years after my mother had passed away, my dad was getting remarried. Before my stepmom officially moved in, we had to clean out much of the house because we were consolidating 2 families' worth of belongings. One morning while we were cleaning, my babysitter and I found a fancy mug that had belonged to my mother. It had the emblem of her college on it, and we accidentally left it in the upstairs office. My dad came home from work a few hours later, and somehow the mug was now downstairs in the kitchen, sitting on top of a sample of the wedding invitations. No one had touched it since the morning. We joked about the haunted mug for a while, saying it was my mom giving her blessing to the wedding. Nothing else happened for a while until a little over a year after they were married. My stepmom had misplaced her car keys and spent half an hour searching every corner of the kitchen, going in circles around the island counter, which had been thoroughly searched. But on what must have been her 50th lap around the kitchen, she suddenly saw her key sitting right on the corner, next to the mug. We placed it on a high shelf after that, and it hasn't moved since. Story 11. A friend once explained to me why she takes sleeping pills. Apparently, when they lived in Georgia, her family bought an older home, beautiful, with lots of character. While her dad was fixing some plumbing in the crawl space, she found a small purple dinosaur toy down there. She played with it for a few weeks and even slept with it in her bed, along with her other toys. One day she woke up and found it staring at her, standing upright on her chest in a different position than how she had left it. She set it aside, but for the next 3 weeks, the same thing happened. It didn't matter if she left it on the floor or locked it in a drawer. One night, she locked it away but still couldn't sleep. She heard the drawer unlock, open, and then slam shut, followed by faint footsteps, and there it was again. On her chest, just watching her, she was terrified and pretended to sleep while it shifted around. She told her mom the next morning, but her mom didn't believe her until she was allowed to lock it in their parents' room. The same thing happened. Eventually, the family moved to another house after other strange occurrences began. The toy was left behind, buried for about a year and a half. Then one day it appeared in their new house, standing just as before, this time on the kitchen counter. They finally got rid of it for good, burned it, and threw the remains into a river. She's never seen it again. But she still has recurring nightmares, which only go away with medication. She can't drink because of the pills and has made several emergency trips to the hospital. Waking up with scratches, the doctors blame on night terrors. Maybe I'm just someone who gets too caught up in scary stories. or creepy toys. But the seriousness in her eyes and the tears that welled up convinced me, whether it's true or not. I believe her, I really do. And I had a hard time sleeping in her current house. Story 12. When my cousin was about 7 years old, his bedroom was in the basement. The basement level was half underground and half above ground, and his bed was right next to a window. One night, out of nowhere, he woke up and saw a man crouched just outside the window, staring at him. He didn't know what to do, so he froze, then turned over and faced the wall. Eventually, he fell asleep. Why he didn't run screaming to his parents' room is still a mystery to me. This happened more than once. On random nights, the same stranger would appear at the window, sometimes tapping the glass with his finger. On the wall opposite the window was a mirror. One night, after turning over in bed to avoid looking at the man, the stranger shined a flashlight at the mirror so the beam would reflect and hit my cousin's face. Almost like he was saying, "I can still see you." But the worst part was one night when the man began pushing on the window, testing if it would open. Thankfully, it was locked. To this day, my cousin doesn't know who the man was, what he wanted, or what might have happened if the window had been unlocked. And he still hasn't told his parents. He's 31 now. Story 13. I hope this doesn't get buried. This happened to my parents about 20 years ago. They were driving out to a hotel near Death Valley for a weekend trip in the winter. They had left later in the day, so they were set to arrive at night. The hotel was located about 30 minutes outside the actual town. When they finally found the place, it was completely abandoned. My mom, who scares easily, didn't want to get out of the car, but my dad, curious by nature, did. While he was walking around the back of the building to explore, a man approached my mom's side of the car. He claimed his motorcycle had broken down and that he delivered newspapers to Death Valley. My mom looked around. There was no motorcycle anywhere in sight. There were no other buildings nearby either. The man begged her to take the newspapers to a hotel in town, saying he would lose his job if they weren't delivered. He held the stack in his hands and kept asking her to open the door so he could give them to her. By now, my mom was getting a really bad feeling about this guy. She locked all the doors and told him to go away, but he kept pleading. Just as things got tense, my dad returned, and the man quickly handed the newspapers to him and took off. They drove away and saw him walking off into the desert. When they finally got to the hotel in town and tried to deliver the newspapers, the woman at the front desk told them the hotel didn't receive any newspaper deliveries. They opened the stack and looked at the top page. It was a newspaper from 1954. Story 14. Paranormal activity is strange to me. I try to disregard it from a scientific standpoint, but I grew up in a house where I just can't explain the things that happened. So I try not to think about it, kind of like how the universe has no edge. But anyway, the house, it was an old house in New Zealand. My family lived there for about 5 years, and there were many eerie things that happened during that time. We had the usual, doors slamming when there was no breeze. Many times my sisters and I would hear footsteps in the hallway when no one was there. One night our family was woken by a loud crash. We all went to check and found a vase shattered in the middle of the bathroom floor. It had been sitting on the windowsill above the sink and vanity, so if it had fallen naturally, it would have hit the sink. But somehow it had landed and broken about 7 feet away in the center of the room. My mother often said she would wake up and feel someone breathing on her face. My biggest scare was when I woke up one night in my room. My bed was in the middle of the room, and I could clearly hear a man breathing heavily, as if he were lying on the floor right next to me. I was 7 years old, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever experienced. I had asthma as a kid and tried to convince myself it was just me breathing strangely. But after holding my breath, I could still hear it. I couldn't bring myself to look at the floor, but thankfully it wasn't between me and the door. It took me about 10 minutes to gather the courage to jump out of bed and run, screaming and crying. To my parents' bedroom, I slept in my mom's bed that night. Story 15. This actually happened to me, so I'll be a little vague for privacy reasons. I've never been the type to be overly cautious, so I used to give rides to hitchhikers and strangers if they looked like they needed help. One day, I was washing my car in the driveway before heading to college when I saw a sketchy-looking guy walking down the street. I don't live in the best neighborhood, and some of the nearby ones are even worse, so being cautious isn't unreasonable. He was dressed strangely, cheap-looking, wrinkled dress clothes, a white button-up shirt with the sleeves unbuttoned, black slacks, and a battered old black briefcase. He had a shaved head and looked thin, like he hadn't eaten well in a while. When he got closer, he asked me for a ride. I got a weird vibe from him, but I said yes. I asked where he needed to go. He was vague and said he'd give me directions and that it wasn't far. He also asked if I could stop at a liquor store. I agreed. He bought a beer and cigarettes, offered me both, but I declined. On the way to his destination, he mentioned it was his first day out of prison after serving 3 years. I didn't know what to say, so I congratulated him. He thanked me and drank his beer. His destination was a known gang hangout on the edge of a particularly bad neighborhood. I pulled in, dropped him off, and he thanked me and walked away. About 5 years later, I saw him again. Same guy, unmistakable, only now he looked healthier, like he'd been eating better. He was on the witness stand at a murder trial. The murder had taken place at the exact location I dropped him off, just 3 weeks after. He testified against the gang members who committed the murder. He had once been in the same gang before prison. He had been in hiding since the trial. The person who was murdered would have become part of my extended family through marriage if he hadn't died. That man was the only person to testify. I had goosebumps the entire time I watched him testify. Story 16. When I was a kid, we moved into a new house. My earliest memory was that my brother's room was always cold, but I didn't think much of it. Years later, I moved into that room, and it wasn't cold anymore. I asked my mom why it used to be. She said that when we first moved in, my sister had that room, and she used to have terrible nightmares. She'd wake up with bruises on her legs and stomach. My mom also had nightmares about a woman telling her to leave the house. Eventually, she performed some kind of ritual, and everything stopped, even the coldness in the room. Years later, my sister was getting married, and my grandma, along with 3 female cousins I had never met, came to stay with us. My mom told me that grandma didn't like staying at our house because she always got sick. The 3 cousins stayed in my sister's room. After their second night there, they were really scared and said someone kept trying to open their door. They saw the doorknob jiggle multiple times, and when they opened it, no one was there. They asked if they could sleep in my room. I thought they were messing with me, but I agreed. They took my bunk bed, and I slept on the floor. That night, I suddenly heard the washing machine turn on. The laundry room was next to mine, so I got up and turned it off. When I came back to my room, I heard what sounded like chains dragging across the hallway floor. I opened the door, but no one was there. This scared me because I had never experienced anything like that before. I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I went to my sister's room out of curiosity. What I saw freaked me out. Faint black marks on the ceiling that looked like footprints, and the window was open. What's scary about that? The second pane of glass in that window had been installed incorrectly and could only be opened from the outside. We lived on the second floor, and it would have been impossible to open without a ladder. It shook me for a while, but after everyone left, nothing strange happened again. I asked my mom about it later, and she told me the house doesn't like new people, and especially not women. That explained why I only experienced the cold room and nothing else, and why my grandma always felt sick there. After that, once in a while sleeping, I'd hear a baby crying. I assumed it was the neighbor's child and thought nothing of it. When we moved out, my mom made me say goodbye to all the neighbors, even those I didn't know. When I said goodbye to the family next door, the ones I assumed had the baby, I asked how the baby was doing. They said they didn't have a baby. About 7 years after we moved out, I went back to visit. When I entered my old room, I noticed it had gotten bigger. I asked the new owner about it. They said the closet used to have a hidden space behind it, making it twice the size. I asked if they'd found anything in there. They said no. I don't know if it had anything to do with what I experienced growing up there, but it was just one more strange thing I learned about that house years later. Story 17. I live in a party house. Enough messed up stuff happens here on a normal day, but you really don't want to be here alone. I'm the only roommate who can stomach it. But then again, I've seen some pretty terrible things in my life. One night, I was home alone. I was certain of this because all my roommates were in Minneapolis for Gay Pride Week. I had planned to throw a party but decided against it, checked the house, and locked up for the night. At around midnight, I heard the dog whimpering at my door, so I got up to let him out. While he was doing his business, I thought I heard a door slam upstairs. At first I figured it was just a breeze, but it was a calm night. As I let the dog back in, I heard a rapid succession of slams and started thinking maybe someone was trying to mess with me. I grabbed a butcher knife and cautiously went upstairs. When I got up there, every door was standing open. That was incredibly strange since my roommates usually kept their doors closed when they were away. I walked down the hallway to check the bathroom door when I heard a loud crash downstairs. A moment later, the dog came sprinting past me and hid in the bathroom behind me. Now thoroughly freaked out, I went downstairs to investigate. I didn't see anything out of place, so I stood still for a moment. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I turned just in time to see my door slam shut and then fling itself open. That's when I decided I was out of there. Story 18. Just after 4 a.m., I was up reading creepy stuff over on Creepy, so my dreams would no doubt be filled with the delightful horrors of Junji Ito. I might be repeating a few things here, but that's fine. I was mostly waiting for a little daylight before going to bed. One of my favorite thoughts before sleep, just as it gets light enough to see the deep blue outside, is looking at the curtains and imagining a human-shaped shadow standing out there. Anyway, my mom told me that when I was very young, I used to get up in the middle of the night and keep watch over the hallway. She said she'd see me sitting at the edge of my bed in the dim light. When she asked what I was doing, I would whisper, "Shh, I'm waiting for them to come back. You need to be quiet or you'll scare them away." This next one is secondhand, but I asked all the people who were there, and they all tell the same story. I'm a logical person. I can explain most things away, and if I can't, I usually just dismiss it. But there's one story told to me by 4 different family members at different times, and it always matches. It happened on the res, a year or 2 before I was born. My grandma's house was full. People had gathered because something weird was going on in the hills. According to my sister, the adults got nervous and sent all the kids to bed in the same room. The kids were all lined up sideways in one bed. Suddenly, something began banging on the walls, like it was trying to find a way into the house. The kids stayed quiet while the adults started yelling. My dad, uncle, and another man were holding the back door shut. Whatever was out there would slam the door open a few inches, and the men would push it back close. These were strong guys, loggers who handled heavy chainsaws all day, but they were struggling to hold the door. While that was happening, the kids noticed something terrifying, a large, shaggy head looking at them through the window. They screamed and ran into the living room. The next morning, they found muddy handprints everywhere the thing had touched. Mud prints around the entire house, mud at the door, and mud at the window where the kids had been. That window is 7 feet off the ground. Logically, maybe it was just a group of people trying to break in. But my dad and uncle weren't the type to be scared of that. In those days, if it was just some drunks, they'd have gone outside with a stick and dealt with it. What really freaked me out were the muddy prints and that huge hairy head. My dad believes in Bigfoot. He once said he saw one about 100 yards across a steep valley while cowboying down south. He described it as the freakiest feeling he'd ever had. He gathered the herd and left quickly. There's another story he only told once. His 2 brothers were riding horses near a mountain when they found something. A carved figurine, like a little statue, sitting on what looked like an altar in the woods. They took it home. After that, they started having terrible luck. Back then, our area was really isolated. Roads could be closed for weeks during the winter. One of those brothers was working with my dad in the woods when a tree split during a fall and landed on him. It crushed his insides. My dad got him back to camp, but they couldn't get out because of the road conditions. He had to watch his brother die slowly. An elder told someone in our family that the figurine had to be returned. They did, but whatever it was must have followed, because the other brother disappeared. My mom told me that part. I never asked Dad about it. He's one of 17 siblings. There's more. My dad used to cowboy west of the river, where there are lots of ghost stories. Once 4 of them were camping by a set of trees they knew were bad luck. They stayed anyway. That night, 3 of them woke up to hear screaming. One guy was hanging in the air by 1 foot. They all saw it. In that same area, there was a crater-like place the cows avoided. Cows would lie down and couldn't get back up. People who camped there would wake up feeling heavy, like gravity was stronger there. My stories are getting choppy because I'm nodding off, so here's one more. My dad's old cowboy friend told me, if you ever go down there, stay on the cow trails. Sometimes people go down there and they end up disappearing. That area is full of grizzly bears and is really remote. I figured people just got lost, but he said, those cows don't wander off trail for a reason. There are deep cracks in the earth, animals fall in, people too. They just go missing. That's what scared me most. Falling into one of those cracks, legs pinned, unable to get out, dying like that. It's a bad way to go. When I was a kid, my dad showed us the area. I saw a rusted truck hood sticking out of the ground. I thought someone had placed it there. But no, it was a full truck, buried in the earth. Story 19. The house that I grew up in was pretty old and always gave me a really weird feeling. A lot of strange things happened while we lived there. For one, my sister, who was about 2 or 3 at the time, would say really strange things. Once, while sitting on the couch watching a movie with my mom, she pointed up to the ceiling and said, "I want to go up there." My mother asked her where she wanted to go, and she said, "Up there, Mom, with those people over there. They're nice to me." No one else saw anything, and we were too creeped out to ask more questions. Another strange thing my sister said was around the same time. While my dad was giving her a bath, she asked him, "Do you remember when I used to take care of you and Mommy?" He was really shocked and asked what she meant. She continued, "I remember when you two were really little, I took care of you." He basically left the room right then. Not only did I personally have an out-of-body experience in that house when I was 7, but we also called the police one time because we heard glass breaking and footsteps in the house. There was a lot of noise that night, like things tearing and breaking. My family was terrified, and we locked ourselves in the bedroom we all shared. When the police got there, there was no one in the house. Nothing was broken, and everything was fine. Every time I drive by the house now, I still get chills. Story 20. My high school teacher told us a story about his friend who lived in rural Arkansas. One day, the friend met a girl at the Walmart checkout. They talked and hit it off well. She was a kind, religious girl, exactly the type he had been hoping to meet. They exchanged numbers. They began having long conversations late into the night. They went on dates. She seemed genuinely nice. She would end every phone call with a prayer, saying something like, "We thank our Father." He was completely smitten. Eventually, she invited him to her house at exactly 7:30 p.m. on a Saturday. She told him to be there on time, not a minute late, or she would break up with him. He was a Little League baseball coach and had a game earlier that day. The game was supposed to end with plenty of time, so he accepted the invite. On the day of the game, it ran longer than expected. He started getting nervous but still had time. However, 3 of the kids' parents were late, and he had to drop them off. In a panic, really not wanting to miss his chance with this girl, he told the kids to hop into his car and started speeding off. After dropping off the first 2, he decided the 3rd kid's house was too far, so he left him on the road and begged him to walk the rest of the way. Yeah, not great. He rushed home, took a fast shower, got dressed, and sped to her house. He arrived at 7:35 p.m. 5 minutes late, a woman in her mid-40s came to the door and said that Clarice, the girl, had said he was late and didn't want to see him. Disappointed, he left. The next day, he saw the house on the news. It was the same house. The woman who had answered the door was being let out in handcuffs. Behind her was the girl he had been dating. The headline mentioned something about child kidnappers. He expected the police to visit him soon, and they did. An officer came to his house and asked if he was who they thought. Nervous, the guy asked if he needed a lawyer. The officer said he wasn't allowed to tell him much legally, but felt morally obligated. This is where things got disturbing. The officer said the women had been involved in human sacrifice. They had found the remains of missing children in the house. There was blood on the walls and jars with names on them. Hearts labeled and preserved. One jar was empty and had his name on it. The girl had invited him for a ritual sacrifice. The ritual apparently had to be done at a specific time. His being late saved his life. Needless to say, some places have really disturbing secrets. Especially in rural Arkansas, Story 21. I live in a really rural place, so it's not unusual to have long stretches of road with absolutely no signs of civilization. No lights, no other cars, nothing. For miles, one night, my friend was driving back from a bonfire party in the desert. She said she saw what looked like a person walking along the side of the road. She could see the figure moving far ahead of her, but as she got closer, she noticed that the way it moved was really strange. Its arms seemed too long, and she said its gait was like nothing she'd ever seen a human do. She described it as staggering, but somehow never falling over. As she got close enough to pass it, she said she just knew she didn't want to see its face. She turned her rear view mirror away, drove by as fast as she could, and didn't look back. She called me later to tell me about it. She was still shaken up. The most disturbing part? The thing had been walking in the direction of our town. Story 22. My friend told me this about a month or so after his mom passed away. She died of a heart attack while she was taking a walk in their back garden. No suspicious circumstances or anything. Everything was normal around their house for about a month. Then, my friend swears that strange things started happening. The garden where she died just seemed to stop thriving. All the plants died, even though they were still being watered on a somewhat regular basis. And to add to that, strange noises could be heard throughout the house. Things being knocked over, unexplained sounds. One night he was woken up by one of those noises. So he walked from his room to the kitchen to get a drink of water and clear his head. When he came around the corner, he swears he saw his mother standing at the stove cooking something. He said you could even smell it. Her ghost, or apparition, turned around, looked at him, and smiled. He began backing away. He wanted to scream and run, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The figure walked out the back door onto the deck and beckoned for him to follow. So he did. She led him into the garden, to the exact spot where she had passed away. He stood there quietly, trying not to panic. The figure stood in place for about 10 minutes, and my friend just watched. Eventually, the apparition disappeared. He waited a few more minutes, just to be safe, then went back inside and tried to fall asleep. The next morning, he chalked it up to a nightmare. But when he went outside to that same spot in the garden, on the exact area where the ghost had stood, 5 roses were growing. One for each member of his family, he claimed. Himself, his sister, his older brother, their father, and one for the dog. At first, I didn't believe him, until he sent me a picture of the roses surrounded by completely dead plants. I wish I still had that picture, but this happened about half a year ago. Still gives me chills when I think about it. I can't even begin to imagine what it was like for him. Story 23. My friend and I went hiking pretty late one night, right before sunset. We decided to travel up a hill to explore, and as we were hanging out at the top, it began to rain. And I don't mean regular rain, it felt like we were in the middle of a storm. We decided to head back because the sun was going down, and the clouds had already hidden most of the remaining light. As we made our way down the hill, we thought we heard footsteps behind us, but we figured it was just the storm playing tricks on us. We soon realized we had gone the wrong way down, and by the time we found the trail again, it was completely dark. As we walked the trail back to my car, we started to feel like we were being followed, or hunted. The rain had let up, so it was easier to hear what was around us. We kept hearing twigs snap, footsteps, not just one set, multiple. We still don't know if it was people or mountain lions or something else. We got out of there fast. Then things got really unsettling. After drying off and sitting in my car, recounting what had happened, we both noticed a man sitting in a car about 20 feet away from us. The weird part? We didn't see anyone in that car when we passed it earlier, and no one had walked past us since. He wasn't looking down at a phone or reading. He was just sitting there staring straight at us. We kept watching him through the mirrors. After about 10 minutes, he turned on his headlights. After another 10 minutes, he slowly drove away. Story 24. This one involves a story about demons, and though I'm an atheist, it still creeps me out. My uncle is a pastor at a church in Oklahoma, and one of his closest friends is a youth minister in a neighboring town. He has a wife and one young daughter. Every Saturday morning, when the daughter was around 5 or 6 years old, she and her mom would wake up early and cook breakfast together. One morning, the daughter saw the kitchen light turn on from her bedroom and heard pots and pans clanging. She assumed her mom had started without her and went to check. But when she entered the kitchen, it was completely dark. No one was there. She went to her parents' room and asked, "Mommy, why did you start breakfast without me?" Her mom was confused and said she hadn't. In fact, she thought it had been the daughter making noise in the kitchen. They woke up the father, my uncle's friend, thinking someone might be in the house. He grabbed an old aluminum baseball bat and walked through the dark house. When he got to the kitchen, a few pots and pans were out, but nothing else seemed disturbed. Next to the kitchen was a reading room with a couch and a rocking chair. When he entered, he noticed the rocking chair moving fast. There was no one in it. He jumped back, frightened, grabbed a Bible off the shelf and shouted, "In the name of Jesus, leave my house!" Instantly, the chair stopped. Nothing like that ever happened again. I don't believe in the supernatural, but that story still creeps me out. Story 25. When I was around 18, one of my friends lived in a house about 3 miles outside the village where the rest of us lived. It was near a freeway and had a large piece of land attached to it. His parents ran a horse stable there. His parents were away on holiday and we were planning to have a small party. Maybe 20 to 30 people. A few of us met in the village and walked through the country roads to get to his house. It took about 30 minutes. When we arrived, we found 2 police cars parked in the driveway. At first, we thought the party had already started and something had happened. But that wasn't the case. Our friend had been eating dinner alone, waiting for everyone to arrive, when he noticed someone standing just beyond the edge of the porch light at the bottom of the garden. Watching him, thinking it was one of us playing a prank, he slipped out the side door to try and sneak up on the person. He circled around but couldn't find anyone. When he came back to the house, he looked through the kitchen window and saw an unknown man sitting at the kitchen table, eating his dinner. The man looked dirty and disheveled, basically like a drifter. My friend panicked and ran over a mile to his nearest neighbor to call the police. When they arrived, they searched the house and the property with dogs, but found no one. It really freaked him out. Several of us ended up staying with him for the rest of the week until his parents came back. Story 26. My sister teaches 3rd grade at a school with many lower-income students. These are their stories. One of her students, normally very well behaved and engaged, suddenly began having trouble staying awake in class. Concerned, my sister approached her at recess and gently asked what was wrong. The girl wouldn't say. Eventually, my sister brought it up with another teacher who knew the family a bit more personally. This teacher explained what she had heard. The little girl in question was serious by nature. She didn't tell tall tales or make things up for attention. But one day she told her mother that every night a young girl with dirty hair and dirty fingernails would come out of her closet and play with her toys. The girl's mother had recently been scolding her for leaving her toys out after bedtime, but the girl insisted she had cleaned them up and that the girl from the closet had taken them out again. Each night the closet door would open slowly and the dirty girl would emerge and begin playing. My sister's student would hide under her covers and listen. That's already enough to terrify me. But then my sister heard something even worse. One night, the family had come home late after watching a movie. Everyone said goodnight and went straight to bed. Not long after, the little girl knocked on her parents' door, sobbing and shaking, and asked to sleep with them. When they asked what happened, she said that when she turned on the light in her room, the dirty girl was already there, sleeping in her bed. Story 27. About a year and a half ago, my best friend of over 15 years and I went out to visit my family farm one night after getting off our second shift jobs. It was a clear, crisp early fall evening in Michigan. We were sitting there talking and stargazing when he asked a strange question. "This place always feels weird, like someone's watching. Did something bad happen here?" I laughed a little and told him I only knew the stories my dad had passed down. I told him about how, when my great-grandfather bought the farm in the early 1930s, it was a family effort to keep it running. Relatives would help with chores and, in exchange, hunt on the land. One cousin came over to help one day and asked to go raccoon hunting that night. He got permission and left shortly after sundown. The next morning, my great-grandfather noticed his cousin's vehicle was still in the driveway. Even though he should have left long before, it was still dark out. But he knew the area well and set off to find him. He headed toward the back pasture field and, coming around a bend, called out his cousin's name. He heard a strange but familiar voice answer back. He said the sound chilled him. It was close to his cousin's voice, but something wasn't right. He called again. This time, the voice sounded more like a growl mimicking his cousin. That was enough. He turned around and ran back, never looking behind him. When daylight came, a group of relatives and farmhands went out to search. They found his cousin's gun, loaded but unfired. They found his hat, stained with some kind of brown fluid. And that was all. My great-grandfather searched for him for over 60 years. The only time he ever expressed hope was when the swamp in the pasture finally dried up. There's more to the story, but since this is already long, I'll stop here. Let me know if you want to hear the rest of the strange events that happened on our family farm. Story 28. One summer when I was about 16, I took a babysitting job watching two girls Monday through Friday. While their parents were at work, I would get there early, around 6 a.m., after their mother left for work. The girls usually stayed asleep until about 10, so I'd watch TV in the downstairs living room until they woke up. At first, it was small things. I'd occasionally feel like someone was standing behind me in the kitchen or near the staircase. I assumed it was one of the girls trying to prank me. I'd get up, walk through the kitchen, and creep up the stairs to try and catch them. But they were never there. This happened at least twice a week. Then one morning while I was watching TV, the channel started changing. I assumed I was sitting on the remote, so I looked through the couch cushions. But it wasn't there. I turned around and saw the remote on the coffee table, untouched. Even stranger, the channels weren't changing in order. They were skipping around. 12, then 34, back to 3, and so on. I ran to the stairs thinking one of the girls was messing with me. Again, no one was there. The girls were asleep in their rooms. The final incident, the one that made me bring everything up to their mother, happened one morning when she asked me to help prepare for her daughter's birthday and blow up some balloons. I agreed, and she handed me a small pump. In the middle of blowing up the balloons, I got thirsty and set the pump down on the counter next to the refrigerator. As I shut the fridge door, the pump suddenly went flying out of the kitchen and rolled into the living room. I tried to be logical about it. I figured maybe I had shut the door too hard, and that's what sent it flying. So I picked the pump up, placed it back in the same spot, and shut the fridge door with the same amount of force. Nothing happened. I did it again. Harder. Still nothing. I tried different spots on the counter in different amounts of force. It never moved. That evening, I finally told their mom about all the strange things. She got very quiet and said, "It's been happening to you too?" I was stunned. She said she'd also seen the TV changing channels by itself, and the girls had told her they sometimes saw kids playing in the backyard. Kids who weren't there. She admitted she told the girls not to say anything because she didn't want to lose another babysitter. Story 29. A few years ago, I took a summer-long trip where I stayed overnight at various people's homes. When my friend and I arrived at one particular house, we met the husband and wife, who had 2 sons in the military and 2 young daughters adopted from a tribal country. I can't quite remember which one. We asked about their daughters, and the mother told us that they had been very sweet when first adopted, except when taken to church. During church visits, the girls would start acting out, screaming, yelling, and behaving completely unlike themselves. Eventually, the girls became Christians, and those behaviors completely stopped. The parents believed the girls had been possessed by something. That night, I was asleep on the top bunk of a bunk bed with my friend below me. I had completely forgotten the story I'd been told. But during the night, I could feel something was wrong in the room. Then my bed started to shake. At first, I figured it was my friend, so I woke him up and asked if he was shaking the bed. He said no. I asked if he could at least feel the bed shaking. He said no again. I could still feel the shaking clearly, and I was scared. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore it, and eventually I fell asleep. The next morning, I told my friend about it. He told me he had felt something wrong in the room too. I never saw anything with my own eyes, but it remains one of the scariest experiences of my life. Story 30. All right, this one is really personal, and I've never told it to anyone, because I don't think they'd understand how deeply it affects me. This is the story of a recurring dream I've had throughout my entire childhood. There's something you need to know about my mother's side of the family. First, I'm Persian, and my great-grandmother gave birth to several sons, 5 that I know of. What's remarkable about this group of brothers, my mom's uncles, is that they all share this strange, powerful aura, a kind of presence that's hard to describe. The dream plays out the same every time. I walk up a staircase or sometimes slowly ascend in an elevator. At the top, I arrive at a tropical oasis with the sun burning bright. Imagine standing on a New York skyscraper, and instead of a cityscape, you see wild jungle before you. At the top, there's a man. I don't recognize him, but he radiates the same aura as my mom's uncles. When I realize he might be one of them, we both smile silently and stare at the sun as he slowly disappears. Then I descend back down. What's truly disturbing isn't the dream itself, but what happens when I wake up. My entire body and mind scream for me to find this man. It's like I'm destined to meet him. I've never had that kind of emotion from a dream before. Not fear, not joy, just an overwhelming urge to find him. Sadly, the feeling fades when I force myself back to sleep. The creepiest part. One of my mom's uncles went missing during the Iran-Iraq War over 30 years ago. His body was never found. No contact, nothing. He is, as Americans would say, missing in action. Story 31. When I was a little girl, my dad had a job that required us to move between different states often. When I was 5 and my sister was 4, we ended up in a small town in Virginia. We rented a very old house on Church Street. Almost immediately after moving in, my sister and I began having night terrors. That alone isn't too strange. But what was strange is that we couldn't be woken up. We were completely hysterical, and we were both dreaming the exact same thing. We would scream for our mom, but our real mother couldn't comfort us, or we'd push her away. We cried about dead people and said we didn't want to die. It absolutely terrified my mom. She eventually told our new neighbors about it, and they were terrified too. Apparently, Church Street was named that way because centuries ago, it had been part of the property owned by the town's church. During a deadly cholera outbreak, so many people died that they ran out of cemetery space. They dug a massive pit to bury the bodies. That pit was later paved over and turned into a road. My mom, who is normally very logical and not someone to scare easily, told my dad that if he didn't move us out of that house, she would divorce him. She firmly believes that my sister and I were being haunted, possibly even possessed, by the spirits of 2 little girls who had died during the outbreak and were buried in that mass grave. She doesn't talk about it much, and honestly, I'm fine with that. Story 32. We live out in the country. The road I used to live on was a dirt road that stretched about 8 miles, with nothing but large hunting leases, acres of undeveloped land, and a few scattered houses. We lived in a big, old 2-story farmhouse at the very end of the road, where it turned off into more rural county roads. One night, I was driving home from work and just listening to the radio. I looked down for a moment to change the station, and when I looked back up, there was a man standing in the middle of the road, just 5 feet in front of me, dressed in an old Confederate soldier's uniform. I slammed on the brakes and felt a hard impact. I was sure I had hit him. I jumped out of the car and looked underneath. Nothing. Then I saw the front of my car. It had blood on it. I searched around the bumper and finally found what I had actually hit, a coyote. I had run it over and it died instantly. I dragged it off the road. Even though I was freaked out, I passed off, seeing the man in uniform as my eyes playing tricks on me. But when I got back in the driver's seat and straightened the car out, my headlights landed on the exact spot where I had left the coyote. I'm not joking. The man in the uniform was kneeling beside its body, staring straight at me. I floored the gas pedal and got out of there fast. I've never been so scared in my life. Story 33. In 2007, I was living with my parents in Alaska while attending college. They had a nice 3-level home in an upscale part of the city. My room was in the downstairs level, the kitchen and living area were on the middle floor, and my parents' room was at the top. The kitchen was directly above my room, and because it had a tile floor, I could always hear it clearly when someone was up there walking around. One morning in early March, I stayed up late finishing math homework. My parents had gone to bed hours earlier, though they both had occasional insomnia. Suddenly, I heard a door upstairs slam and then heavy footsteps in the kitchen. It sounded like the person was wearing shoes. I assumed it was my dad up late and thought I might go up to keep him company. But as I started walking toward the stairs, I had an overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. Instead, I locked myself in the bathroom with my cell phone and called our landline. My dad picked up, sounding annoyed. "What are you doing stomping around the kitchen?" he asked. He and my mom came downstairs immediately, and together we searched the entire house. All the doors and windows were shut and locked. Nothing was broken. There was snow on the ground outside, but no footprints, no sign of anyone having walked around the house. There was also no mud or melted snow on the tile floor in the kitchen, despite the loud footsteps I had clearly heard. What really unsettled me was that strong, unexplainable feeling that something wasn't right. I had heard one of my parents moving around at night plenty of times before, and it never scared me. But that night was different. Sometimes I still wonder what I would have seen if I had gone up those stairs. Story 34. About 10 to 12 years ago, I was in high school, living with my mom, who was recently divorced, and my little brother. We'd always hear noises that sounded like footsteps on the second floor, ending with creaks in my mom's room. I used to brush it off as the house settling. I stayed up late a lot, playing PC games, watching TV, or just wasting time. My mom worked from home and was also a night owl. She would often work downstairs, either in the kitchen or in a spare bedroom, directly beneath my room. I could always tell when she was on the phone with someone, usually a boyfriend or a friend, because I'd hear the faint sound of her voice through the floorboards. One night during summer break, I heard her talking downstairs all night. It was clearly her chatting away until around 4 a.m. When I heard her come up the stairs and go to bed, I stayed up a little longer, then went to sleep. The next day, I woke up around 1 p.m. and went downstairs. My mom was in the kitchen doing paperwork. I casually said, "Wow, you were up late last night, huh?" She looked confused and asked, "What do you mean?" I told her I'd heard her on the phone all night and then going to bed around 4 a.m. She insisted she had gone to bed at 9:30 p.m. because she had an early morning meeting with a client. I asked again, "Are you sure? I swear I heard you until at least 3 a.m. and I heard you go up the stairs." She was adamant. She had been asleep for hours. I hadn't had the TV on. I was just playing a game with low volume so I wouldn't wake my brother. But I know I heard talking. I know I heard footsteps. That house always gave me the creeps for reasons I couldn't explain. But that night definitely topped everything. We moved out not long after that. I've never experienced anything quite like it again. Story 35. This one will probably get buried, but it's spooky as hell. And very real. Definitely worth the read. To start, I'm as non-religious as it gets. Like many people online, I don't believe in much that science can't explain. This is the only experience in my life that still makes me question myself. I was around 6 years old, living in our old house. At the time, I shared a room with my younger sister. Our beds were against the same wall with a nightstand separating them. The room was square and connected to the rest of the house by a long hallway. My sister was around 4 then. I woke up one night, no idea what time it was, but everything was silent. The highway outside my room, which was usually busy, was dead quiet. As I lay in bed, I opened my eyes and looked up at the ceiling. Floating about 4 feet above me were 2 small children. They had a greenish glow and their outlines were not clearly defined from the space around them. They giggled when they realized I was watching them. I couldn't tell if it was a harmless giggle or something else. I thought maybe I was just groggy from sleep and tried closing my eyes to make them disappear. When I opened them again, they were still there. Closer this time. Panic set in. I squeezed my eyes shut again. Still there. Now they were only about 2.5 feet away. I was terrified. I jumped out of bed and ran to the door and into the hallway. I paused for a second and turned back. They had gasped when I moved and were now staring directly at me. I bolted from my mom's room and dove into her bed shaking. I stayed there the rest of the night. To this day, I regret leaving my sister behind in that room, but I was too afraid to do anything else. I've only told a few people about this. One day, a cousin of a friend was telling a childhood story, without knowing mine, and described seeing little floating children with a dim, glowing green color. Hearing that made my skin crawl. I hate remembering this,